Welcome to Testmaking and Assessment for English Teachers, sponsored by the Embassy of the United States and Akita International University. This is the second lecture of the series. In this lecture, we will discuss some basic principles of test item design. Test items come in a variety of styles. In this lecture, we will look specifically at a class of items known as receptive or receptive response items. You are no doubt familiar with receptive response items because they are the predominant item style in both commercial English proficiency tests, such as TOEIC and ACAN, as well as school tests designed by teachers. The most popular styles are binary choice, multiple choice, and matching. In this module, we will focus on multiple choice items, but let's first take a quick look at the other two types. The most common binary choice item style is the true or false item. Here, the test taker reads a sentence, usually about a reading or listening passage, and marks whether it is a true statement or a false statement. For example, according to the reading passage, the first moon landing occurred in 1959. Mary bought a scarf for her mother. Students are instructed to circle whether the sentence is true according to the passage. There are, however, some other binary choice styles that teachers should know about. In the alternate choice style, a word in a sentence is replaced by two choices. Test takers must circle the correct choice. This is very useful for testing knowledge of grammatical forms, but can also be used for testing comprehension of content in a reading or listening passage. Binary choice items are easy to create and to mark. A disadvantage is that the test taker has a 50% chance of guessing correctly, and widespread guessing decreases test reliability. To overcome this disadvantage, take care that the items are on target. If the items are not too difficult, most of the test takers will be able to answer them without guessing. Also, use many items. Longer tests are more reliable. Another approach is to put binary choice items in sets of 2 or 3. To get credit, the test taker must answer all items correctly. The probability of guessing both items correctly is 25%, which is about the same as one multiple choice question with 4 options. This technique makes it more difficult to get points from guessing, but to work well, the sentences should be related in some way and should be of about equal difficulty. If possible, avoid putting an easy and difficult sentence together, or two sentences about quite different sections of a passage. We want to avoid students losing credit for a test item they can answer because they missed another, possibly more difficult item. Another popular receptive response item style is the matching item. In this style, a set of 4 or more words or phrases, called stems, must be matched to a set of options. There should always be a few more options than there are stems, so that students who know all but one must still choose from several options at the end. Matching works very well for vocabulary tests. Nation's Vocabulary Levels Test is a good example. However, matching may also be a good format for testing understanding of ideas or concepts from a reading or listening passage, such as matching terms that are introduced in a reading passage to their definitions. Matching items can be easy to make and score. However, a disadvantage is that the words or phrases must be of a similar type. It would be difficult, for example, to make a set of matching items that test diverse content of a reading passage. Let's now consider the multiple choice style. First, there are standard labels for referring to the parts of a multiple choice item. These labels are used uniformly in testing books and by testing agencies such as Testmaking. It makes it easier to evaluate and critique test items if we use the standard labels. So let's learn them. The stem refers to the main text of the item, the question that the test taker must answer, complete, respond to, etc. Options are the possible answers that a test taker must select from. The most common number of options is 4, but a multiple choice item may have 3 or 5 options. A distractor is an incorrect option, a wrong answer. The key is the correct answer or option. When we show our test items to other teachers for feedback, we often mark the key with an asterisk symbol. Finally, an answer key is a document used for scoring a test which contains keys for all items. One more term related to multiple choice items is double key. A double key refers to when a multiple choice item has 2 possible answers. A double key is unintentional. It is a design flaw and something we hope to spot before the test item is put to use. Let's now take a close look at what is involved in designing effective multiple choice test items. Before you write any kind of test, you should first ask yourself, what do you want to test? For example, listening ability, grammar knowledge, reading comprehension? This question is worth some thought and discussion with teaching colleagues. Poor quality test items are often the result of trying to test more than one thing at a time. So things like reading comprehension and grammar knowledge are confused. This is related to test validity, especially construct validity, as discussed on page 33 of Brown and Abewikrama. It is always better to test one skill or area of understanding at a time. This not only makes it less confusing for the test takers, but helps you as a teacher diagnose weaknesses when students perform poorly on the test. Let's take an example. Suppose we want to test listening ability. Let's also imagine that our learners are second or third year junior high school, not very strong in listening, but also slow readers and somewhat weak in vocabulary. We have decided to use a fairly common format for our test. Students will listen to a short dialogue recorded by 2 ALTs, and then answer a multiple choice question about the dialogue that they read on their test paper. Here are 3 points that we should keep in mind when designing such a listening item. First, minimize reading. Make the item stem and options short and easy to read. Use familiar vocabulary. Avoid using vocabulary or expressions in the stem and options that some students might not know. Avoid grammar error distractors. Don't make distractors with grammar errors. An option should not be wrong simply because it has a grammar error, unless, of course, it is grammar that you want to test. Finally, avoid ambiguity. There should only be one correct answer. This might seem obvious, but ambiguous distractors are sometimes difficult to spot. Take care to avoid distractors that could be true under some imagined situation. Let's examine a poorly designed multiple-choice listening item. This particular listening item has several design flaws. First, notice that all of the multiple-choice options, which the test taker must read, are quite long. If we compare the written item to the listening dialogue, we see that the item stem and options contain more words than the dialogue. If the time allowed to read and answer is very short, this item could be testing reading speed or scanning skill more than it is testing listening ability. Another potential flaw is that the item uses the expression "turned it over" as a synonym for gave. This phrasal verb could be less familiar to students than the simple verb gave. We might be testing vocabulary knowledge as much as listening ability. Another problem is that option C is based on grammar errors. The test designer apparently considers this option incorrect because the two verb forms are wrong. However, in a communicative sense, this option is correct. It is exactly what happened to the bicycle. A test taker with good listening skills could easily overlook these errors and choose this option because it is factually correct. This is especially true when there is time pressure because there is so much to read. This is not to say that recognizing correct grammar is not important. The point is that, as teachers, it is more difficult to interpret the test results and correctly diagnose problems when more than one thing is being tested. If a student chooses option C, is it because they didn't understand the dialogue, are weak with verb forms, or both? It would be difficult to know. Finally, is this item free of ambiguity? For example, option D is quite close to the correct answer. According to the dialogue, it was Jane who bought the bicycle, not the woman's friend. But could Jane and the woman be friends? There is nothing in the dialogue to directly indicate that. However, the man's answer implies that the woman knows Jane. If a test taker imagines that Jane is the woman's friend, then option D would also be correct. Let's take a look at a revised version of this test item. The dialogue is unchanged. It is still our goal to test listening ability. However, several revisions have been made to the multiple choice item. First, the stem has been changed to "Who has the bicycle now?" "Who has the bicycle now" has a single correct answer that can easily be understood from the dialogue. In addition, the options are now quite short. The reduced reading is partly because we changed the stem. What happened to the bicycle requires longer sentences with subjects, verbs, and objects. "Who has the bicycle now" allows us to write options using names or short phrases. In addition, the distractor that referred to the woman's friend has been removed. This eliminates any potential double key related to ambiguity about whether the woman's friend might refer to Jane. Finally, there is no longer a distractor that relies on a grammar error to make it incorrect. Altogether, these revisions make this multiple choice test item less confusing for students as well as for teachers to interpret. If a lower intermediate student answers this item incorrectly, we can quite confidently assume it is because he or she could not understand the spoken dialogue. Let's take a look at a few other design flaws that are commonly found in multiple choice items. First, Avoid grammar clues in the stem and options that a clever test taker might use to find the answer. Look this item over. Can you spot the flaw? I will pause for a few seconds. The article "an" provides a clue because only the key begins with a vowel. How could we fix it? In this case, repairing the item is not difficult. We simply remove the article from the stem and include appropriate articles with each option. Next, avoid redundant or unnecessary words. Try to write items efficiently so that test takers need to read as little as possible. How can this item be improved? A person who travels in is repeated 4 times in the options. These unnecessary words require extra reading time and can distract the test taker from the purpose of the item, which is to test their understanding of the word astronaut. This can lead to careless errors. How can we improve this item? We can easily fix this item by moving the phrase "a person who travels in" to the item's stem. Then the test taker only needs to read it one more time. Notice that we have also made the key word astronaut stand out by making it bold and italic. Making keywords stand out like this can help the test taker quickly identify what the item is asking. This also helps avoid careless errors. Careless errors decrease our test reliability. Another design flaw that is surprisingly common is items that test takers can answer without understanding the reading or listening passage. There are 2 possible ways that this can happen. One way is that the topic is well known, and at least some test takers can answer using their background knowledge. In this example, most test takers in Japan will be able to answer correctly using their background knowledge. The other problem is using implausible or nonsensical distractors. In this example, option D stands out because it is not an animate object like the other 3 options, and unless Albania is mentioned in the passage, it is unlikely to attract any test takers. How can we identify and fix problems like this? The solution is quite easy. Ask an ALT and a JTE to examine the items first without reading the text. This technique is widely used by professional testing agencies such as Testmaking as part of their item screening process. As a first step in screening, ask some colleagues to examine the items and try to answer them without reading the passage or the listening transcript. Both native-speaking and non-native speaking teachers can provide valuable perspective. Natives are good at spotting double keys, hidden clues, and errors in the text. Non-native speakers are more familiar with background knowledge of test takers. Non-native teachers may better understand the attractiveness of distractors. Let's summarize the points involved in screening a set of multiple-choice items. We can divide the process into 3 steps. First, check for hidden clues, background knowledge, and non-feasible distractors. If the item depends on a written or spoken text, ask a colleague to examine items before seeing the text. Ask yourself, can an item be answered correctly from common background knowledge? Are there hidden clues within the item or from other items in the set that help the colleague identify the key? Should any distractors be eliminated because they are not feasible? Step 2. After reading or listening to the associated text, can your colleague find any potential double keys? Are distractors based on the testing goal? For example, do any distractors rely on grammar or vocabulary knowledge rather than listening comprehension? Is the answer clear? Will test takers be able to identify the key based on what they read or heard in the text? Can any distractors be improved? Ask your colleague for suggestions. Finally, in Step 3, look for ways to improve the items by making small changes to details. For example, is the item economical? Is unnecessary or redundant language avoided? For example, can repeated text be eliminated by moving it to the stem? Can language be simplified? In general, language used in the test item should be easier than language in the text. Is language used in the key identical to the language in the text? Can synonyms or paraphrase be used to ensure you are testing comprehension and not merely word or phrase recognition? It is always better to use synonym or paraphrase in the test item if you can, but try not to make language in the test item more difficult than the text that you are testing. For this module, your assignment will be to write a set of 6 to 8 multiple choice items based on a reading passage. After you upload your items, your colleagues will critique them, and you will examine and critique your colleagues' items, which are based on the same reading passage. I've chosen reading items for the first test writing assignment because most teachers are familiar with making reading tests. But as a first step, before beginning the assignment, let's consider for a moment what is involved in testing reading. First of all, testing reading can be divided into 2 categories. First, reading comprehension. Does the reader understand the meaning of the reading passage, including its implications and the writer's attitude or intentions? Second, we can test reading skills. Has the examinee mastered the skills or techniques that experienced readers employ? Let's consider the first one, reading comprehension. Here is what some might say is a straightforward test of reading comprehension. The reader first reads the passage and then answers the questions about the passage below. We could make each of these questions into a multiple choice test item, but for our purposes, let's simply answer them with short phrases or sentences. For the first question, a correct answer would probably be strolling in the park. For question number 2, a correct answer would be because she seemed very absorbed. For question 3, a correct answer would be silently. And for question 4, they will take a stroll in the park together. Is everyone in agreement that those are good answers? If a test taker could produce those answers, could we feel confident that he or she comprehended the reading passage? Let's take a look at a similar reading test. Before you try to look up wasubing or chandered in your dictionaries, these are nonsense words. They have no meaning. Consequently, none of us could claim that we comprehend this passage, and yet Most of us can use our grammar knowledge to create responses that appear to answer these questions correctly. For example, a short answer to question number 1 would be wasubing in the slook. Number 2 could be because she seemed very chandered, and so on. The point of this exercise is that determining whether a test taker has really understood a reading or listening passage can be challenging. I think we have demonstrated to ourselves that it can be possible to answer comprehension questions without truly comprehending a passage. To get around problems like this, we need to use synonyms or paraphrase so that the test takers do not simply select answers that would be grammatically correct. Let's now take a detailed look at what testing reading comprehension involves. We can divide reading comprehension into 7 areas or subgroups. First, global comprehension, or identifying the main idea or topic of the passage. Typically, a test item will ask directly about the topic of the passage or perhaps for a title of the passage. Supporting ideas are usually the key topics of paragraphs or subsections. Understanding the non-literal meanings of expressions and idioms. Details, identifying such things as numbers, dates, times, reasons, causes, etc. Identifying which facts are not stated or written. This can be important when doing academic tasks such as writing summaries. Inferences, identifying ideas that are not explicitly stated, speculating what will happen next, etc. Finally, inferring the attitudes, emotions, or intentions of the writer. Next, let's look at some reading skills that are important to test. Here are several important reading skills that can be tested. First, distinguishing main ideas from details. Second, understanding inference or implied detail. Third, grammar, parsing and understanding complex grammatical structures. Fourth, learning new vocabulary from context, that is, being able to guess the meaning of unknown words from the context. And fifth, identifying pronoun antecedents or other referents in the text. It is now time to move on to the 2 activities for this module. This will include a short analysis of reading items, followed by an item writing assignment. You will find further instructions below. I have also uploaded a short excerpt from Language Assessment. It is about 6 pages and covers much of the same material that we have gone over in this lecture. I think it will be a useful reference for you. This is the end of the lecture for Module 2. Good luck with your item writing assignment.